For many, they view God as a micromanager. Have you guys ever felt that way yourselves, where God is kind of just hovering over you, constantly agitated, irritated at everything you're doing, disappointed in you, just waiting to call you out on your many mistakes or failures or shortcomings? Faith, to people with this mindset of God, they view faith itself, this relationship with Christ, as a means of learning how to color inside the lines. Christ once used the analogy of a hospital for the church, and it's a very effective, powerful analogy when it comes to serving and caring for the lost and the needy. The church should be a place where sinners come and learn about Christ. It does a very poor job when we start to view the church as a hospital as we know it today, as a very orderly, clean, neat, and otherwise sterile environment, or dull. Religion then is devoid of life. It is the sterile thing. And I hope over the last few weeks of this series, we found that a relationship with God should not be that, is not that. Christ has never considered a relationship with him to be this like super compact, orderly, sterile, whitewashed thing. Nor is he calling us into this safe lifestyle or this safe and comfortable lifestyle. And it's not about learning how to color inside the lines and follow all the rules. When we read scripture, and especially just the words of Christ himself, like how he defines faith in him and the relationship with him, we find it's actually a very, very different invitation. It's an invitation that's a lot closer to inviting you to ride a roller coaster with him. And let me explain that. So I went to, and McCann was here as well, Oaks Park for a friend's birthday when we were younger. When we got to the roller coaster, Looping Thunder, has anyone ever been to Oaks Park? Do you remember Looping Thunder, the roller coaster there? Yeah, Casey definitely knows. Well, I remember being in line and seeing the ground littered with screws, nails, and chunks of metal and thinking, I hope none of that's important to the ride. Yeah, so I stepped out of line. I said, no thanks. You guys go on that ride without me. I'll wait for you. And if you know me, you know I'm very stubborn. When I say no and I refuse to do something, at least historically, I'll kind of dig my heels in. So all their protests, their bribes, their pleas, it fell on deaf ears. I stayed outside a line. I said, you're not getting me on that roller coaster. Now, if you know me, you also know I have a kryptonite, a weakness of sorts, something that historically also has always broken through my stubbornness. Women. Now, the sister of my friend, whom, I had a crush on, stepped out of line to join me, leaving the rest of our group to join me. I said that she didn't have to wait, that she could just go have fun. I don't mind waiting out here. I just don't want to go on the ride. But she said she's going to stay outside, not join the group as long as I did. Now, of course, I was still digging my heels, and I said, okay, we're just going to wait out here then. But to my surprise, she didn't protest any further. She didn't try to trick me. She didn't yell at me. She was really just going to stand there and watch all of our friends have fun and go on this ride without us and just sit there in silence. And so I said, okay. I sighed and I said, let's go. Now, Jesus tells a parable in Scripture. It's one of my favorite. We're going to get to both of my favorite parables in Scripture today, but one of them is a parable of a shepherd with a flock of 100 sheep. And one of them goes missing, is lost. And so Christ poses a question to the crowd as he's asking, or as he's telling this story. And he says, what would the shepherd do? Won't he leave the 99 to find the one who is lost? And he goes on to say that when the shepherd does eventually find that lost sheep, both he and that sheep will be joyous. There's going to be such a celebration that shepherd's, of course, going to go talk to his neighbors and celebrate the fact that they found the lost sheep. Now, keep in mind that idea of celebration, celebrating the lost, celebrating bringing in the lost. Okay, so this girl invites me to join the others, and when I refuse, instead of screaming at me to join her from within the line, she steps out of line, totally willing to stand there in the silence and the boredom with me while everyone else has the time of their lives. So just like my crush, just like the shepherd, God is going to pursue us. He will seek us out. He will wait patiently for us to turn to him. And the moment we do, there is this great celebration. It is a beautiful moment between a boy and his crush, or a shepherd and his lost sheep, and God with us. But the roller coaster analogy goes a little bit further. So as we waited in line, again, loose parts, bolts, the ride itself shaking and rattling, something very, very fierce. I think there was a reason it got torn down. Now I was in line. I was waiting, and that analogy of the fear, the expectation as you're in line for the roller coaster and as the roller coaster is starting is very real. Of the tension builds. It doesn't go away. It gets worse and worse. Now, I wasn't sure what to expect with the ride itself, but either way, whether it was a horrible and frightening experience or a really fun one, I was going to do it sitting next to my crush. So whatever it was like, I was going to experience it with her. So I was excited. And it turns out, as Casey mentioned, roller coasters, especially this one, can hurt really, really bad. At least this one did. Suddenly I was whipped left and right, up and down. My bones rattled, my brain rattled. But it was so fast and so enthralling that I really didn't have time as I was on it to question my sanity or to question if I made the right choice or if maybe I should stop doing whatever women tell me to do just because I like them. Of course, I didn't learn that lesson. I just had to hold on and enjoy the ride. When we say yes to Christ's invitation, to Jesus' invitation, suddenly we're strapped in, not sure what to expect. Then we begin that long climb of growth, Bible study, baptism, volunteering, and we think, no problem, right? This is easy. In this room, it's pretty easy to follow Jesus, and when you're surrounded by other Christians or at camp, it's very easy to be Christ-like and to love and to forgive. And we think, no problem, I can follow Jesus anywhere. Give me your worst, God. And then wham, right? We crash into the twists and turns of life, jerking left and right, up and down. Years and years go by in seconds until, boom, we're dead. So it's a wild, thrilling ride. It's a life where every moment matters. It's a breathtaking, thrill-filled, bone-rattling, brain-shaking, radical life of passion. It's not neat and orderly. It's also really, really messy. So there's a father who has the same strict routine every single day. Same habits, same breakfast, same route every single day. His 4-year-old son, well, he takes notice, as kids do. They observe what their parents do, and so they notice this pattern every single day. Now, one day, as his father came home, he, as he always had, hung his coat on the exact same spot and began to head towards the kitchen for his daily glass of milk and cookie that he would then grab and go and watch the news. But then he noticed the son waiting down at the end of the hallway, just watching him. And before he could even take his first step, the son ran into the kitchen. And so curious, the father followed him, and he peeks into the room and he sees his son. He pulls out the bottom drawer and climbs up on the counter, which he's not supposed to do. And then he grabs a glass out of the cupboard, knocking over a bunch of other glasses. Luckily, none of them break. And then he climbs down, back off the counter, onto that drawer, and he stretches as far as he can, knocking over the cookie jar. Luckily, it's plastic, but cookies spill everywhere, all over the dirty, filthy kitchen floor. Next, he opens the fridge, and he grabs the giant gallon of milk, which was much too heavy for him, and it crashes to the ground, spilling everywhere. But he manages to spill a last little bit of milk into a cup, grabs a cookie off the dirty kitchen floor, and he hands them both to his father. Now the father, with bright, teary eyes, lifted his son into an embrace amongst the spilled milk and now ruined cookies, thanking his wonderful son, who in an act of love and passion did his best for his father, to show his father that he loves him, that he cares for him, that he sees him. For most of our lives, we've probably had a lot of loud voices telling us, get down, or don't do that, or you're not doing that right. And now my dad would have a heart attack listening to that story. I'm sure most of you would. And most of us would probably freak out long before that 4-year-old made it onto that counter, stopping him from ever doing that. But if the father had listened to those voices, he would have prevented his son from living passionately in the moment and showing love to him in the best way he knew how. That's our relationship with Christ. Despite the many voices, including those in our own heads that tell us don't do that, or God's going to be angry with you, or you're going too far outside of the lines. God is not a micromanager. He's not tearing his hair out at every single little thing we do. He's not judging every action, every word, every thought we take. Instead, he's letting us make our messes. He's letting us color outside the lines and make our many, 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 many mistakes. But then amongst our mess, the mess of our lives, the chaos of our lives, he's waiting to lift us up and to thank us and to tell us that he loves us. Now, I want us to turn to Luke chapter 15. And it'll be Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 24. Now, this will be my favorite parable. It's probably the most well-known parable, the prodigal son, the lost son, the son who, spoiler, returns home. And that'll be in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 24. And so it starts in verse 11, and we're only going to be reading through to 24. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, before you die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. Now, a few days later, the younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there, he wasted all his money in wild living. Wild living, what does that mean? Probably, as you would imagine, a young man who's very hasty, spending his money, drinks, women, probably parties. A lot of luxuries. And so about that time, his money ran out. A great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. And of course, no one's going to give him anything. He is a rich, spoiled brat. They deserve this. They deserve to experience what poverty is like. This is the bed they made. But when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food, enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.'" He's desperate, he's hungry, and he just wants to be close to his father again. So he returned home to his father. This is where we get the father's perspective. And while he was still a long way off in the distance, his father saw him coming. And filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son. He embraced him and he kissed him. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son." But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf that we have been fattening. We must celebrate." Again, that idea of celebration with a feast. "For this son of mine was dead, and now he has returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So let the party begin." The end of the story always, or this part of the story always gets to be, "So let the party begin." It is such a stark contrast to how we view faith, our relationship with Christ, with Christianity in the West. Right? When is the last time you thought of Christianity as being a party? As being a thing to enjoy, to celebrate? No, because Christianity must be about learning how to color inside the lines, right? It's orderly, it's neat. It's the ceremony, it's the learning how to live by rule. It's abandoning all these things and following the commands of God. It's homework, it's a chore. It's something that takes from us. It's a sacrifice, right? Now, McCain and I like to quote from Ricky Bobby often, and especially the scene in which they're describing their version of Jesus that they like to pray to. And Cal, what is this, Naughton Jr.? Yeah, says, "I like to picture Jesus in a tuxedo print t-shirt because it says, 'I want to be formal, but I'm here to party.'" And we laugh, and it's dumb, and it's obviously a joke, but also it's true. At least in the way Jesus describes it, that's more true than most of the West view Christ, right? We focus so much on the burden and the sin and the guilt and the rules and the religious ceremony. And if we don't do everything right, then are we disappointing God? Are we failing? But Christ calls us friend. He says we should celebrate. He uses example after example of no, faith in him is a celebration. It's a joy. He says, let the party begin. And there's a quote I read this week that applied here and really hit me. And it says, you and I can give thanks that the focus of Christian thinking appears to be shifting from North America and Northern Europe, where people write rules and obey them, to places more like Africa and Latin America, where people still know how to dance. And then that quote got me thinking of another quote that I like that says, like a dance, the more rigid I became, the harder it got. So I got older and I got wiser and I learned to relax. And I learned to soften, and that dance got easier. The idea of faith as a dance, as something that isn't about rigid rules, about failure and success, but about learning how to move and party and navigate with Christ. In the Chronicles of Narnia, God is represented by the lion, Aslan. And it's one of my favorite scenes in any book. It's a sacred moment when Lucy and Susan see him back from the dead for the first time. Their friend, long gone for a long time, they see him alive, Aslan. He's there in the flesh. He's there. And it's this sacred, holy moment. And what do? They begin to play. They chase one another. It's a game of tag. And once the game is over and they're exhausted, the book reads, "It was such a romp as no one has ever had except in Narnia. And whether it was more like playing with a thunderstorm or playing with a kitten, Lucy could never make up her mind." That idea of our relationship with Christ as not being able to ever fully grasp, is it a thunderstorm we're messing with, or is it a kitten that we're messing with? And I beg you all, if you learn nothing else from this series, this is the final words, and I actually mean that, Derek. These are the final words of this series, this 4-week-long series. Kill the idea in your mind that faith has to be this dull, boring, lifeless, sterile thing of ceremonies. Celebrate, dance, play, go on an adventure, sing, let your hearts stir and be in awe of a creator, of God. Shake with fear and tremble and fall flat on your face. Go on that roller coaster and hang on for dear life. Fall in love with Christ. Choose life and let the party begin.